Okay, it is 7 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Navigating the Flexible and Remote Job Market, which is part of our Get That Job webinar series here at the Champaign Public Library. My name is Jordan Neal, and I am the career librarian here at the library, so thank you all for joining us. For the latest library news and updates, please visit our website, champaign.org, or you could follow us on social media if that's an option for you. We are pleased to announce that the library has reopened for grab-and-go service and computer use. We were briefly closed for the last 2 days due to weather. However, we plan to reopen tomorrow at 9 a.m. for that grab-and-go service. Once again, please visit our website for more information. You could email us at librarian@champaign.org if you have any questions, or you can chat with us just by visiting the homepage of our website. We are still offering our Book a Librarian service virtually if you need any help at home. To request a session, please visit champaign.org/bookalibrarian to fill out a request form. We are still also offering our curbside services if you prefer not to come inside the library. And as always, our e-library is always open where you can enjoy ebooks, movies, and more using your Champaign Public Library card, or you can sign up for a virtual library card through our website for instant access. Moving on to some Zoom features available to you that might help during this particular webinar. Depending on your computer device, if you take a look at your Zoom window, you can hopefully see audio settings at the bottom left of the screen. You can adjust your audio settings like changing your speaker by clicking on tapping on the upward arrow next to your speaker. Moving to the center bottom of your screen, you will see a chat and raised hand option. Clicking on the chat will open or close a chat box on the right side of your Zoom window, or sometimes it displays in the middle of your screen and you can drag it around, again, depending on your device. You can also have the option to raise hand to receive assistance. You could use this if you have any technical difficulties or you'd like to speak and ask a question if you prefer not to type in the chat. We invite you to use the chat or raised hand option to ask questions or leave any comments. Our presenters plan to answer any questions at the end of the webinar. I would also like to remind everyone that our webinars are recorded, so please be mindful when you're sharing those questions and comments. And then finally, I would like to introduce our presenters, Brie, Reynolds, and Tracy Capizzoli, who are both career coaches at FlexJobs, which is a site for remote, flexible schedule and freelance job listings. They will share some insights about finding a remote job, especially considering the current situation. And I usually mention, we invite you to read their entire bio on our website, but they both enjoy helping people overcome any of their roadblocks and ultimately getting to career happiness. I'm so happy to welcome them today. So with that, Brie and Tracy, I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having us. My name is Brie, and I'm here with my colleague Tracy, and we're excited to be presenting to you tonight. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to be going over the first half of our presentation, and then I'll turn it over to Tracy to present the second half. So we'll be tag teaming tonight's event. So yes, we're going to talk about how to successfully navigate the flexible and remote job market. And I will go into some of the details about that and what the job market looks like. And then Tracy's going to talk about positioning yourself for those types of jobs. And that includes resume information and things like that. So kind of the details of how to do this. So let me advance the slides here. So we're going to cover just briefly a little bit about FlexJobs, so you know where we're coming from and what our background is. And then we'll talk about trends in the remote and flexible job market, especially what we've been seeing over the last year given the pandemic. We will also go into finding flexible jobs and companies, how to actually pinpoint opportunities that you would like to apply for, and positioning yourself for flexible work too. Throughout the presentation, we're also going to be sharing some links to helpful articles and some downloadable samples for things like resumes. So in the chat area, you'll be able to get those links as we're sharing them, and you can click on those as we go and save those resources for yourself. So let's see, just a little bit about FlexJobs. So FlexJobs is a job search service. We were founded back in 2007, and we list telecommuting and remote, flexible hour, part-time jobs, anything that kind of takes you out of that traditional 9-to-5 office schedule. And the big thing is that every job and company on our site is pre-screened. So we really focus on professional level types of jobs. Just for some fun facts, most of the jobs on our site are employee jobs, and most are full-time jobs that happen to have some type of flexibility. So they can be remote jobs, they might offer flexible schedules. We are primarily based in the United States, but we do offer flexible job and remote jobs that are available around the world as well. And so that's really important to know. We talk to lots of groups around the country, and so when you're searching for a remote job, you always want to put in your location. That's one of the biggest things that we talk about. We have helped over 5.7 million people since we were founded back in 2007, and we're a membership site, which is a little bit different than most job search boards. So you'll find to access some of the more detailed information on FlexJobs, you need to be a member, but we do offer a lot of free services, free information on the site. And so all of the links that we're going to be sharing today to articles and downloads, those are all publicly available and free and open. One of the things that's probably the best thing, easiest thing to use as a public member using FlexJobs is our database of over 55,000 companies that have been vetted and pre-screened. They've gone through our process that have posted flexible jobs in the past. And so it's a really good database if you're looking to see if a company has offered a flexible or remote type of job in the past, or if they hire for your particular type of job. That's a really good database to use. You can search that publicly, and you don't need to be a member of FlexJobs to use that. I am the career development manager, and that's the team of career coaches that we have at FlexJobs. And we just love helping people find remote jobs and help them be better job seekers and sort of figure out their next step in their career. So we're happy to be here. So let's dive into the important stuff, how to actually find one of these jobs. The information that we're going to share is largely usable for any job search website, so it's not going to be exclusively to FlexJobs. Just in case anybody was wondering, this is going to be information that you could use wherever you are searching online. So the first thing I want to cover is what is a flexible job, because we're talking about navigating the flexible job market. A flexible job is kind of the all-encompassing term that we use to describe any job that takes you out of that 9-to-5 in-office type of traditional arrangement. So it can be things that are flexible based on the scheduling. So if you have flexible hours or you're working an alternative schedule, it can be flexible based on the location, and that's where remote jobs come into play. And it can be flexible based on the status. So freelance jobs we think are inherently flexible because as a freelancer, you're usually in control over who you're working with, what you're working on, those sorts of things, how much you're working. But employee jobs can also be flexible as long as they have some other type of flexibility wrapped into them. So you could be an employee who happens to work from home or have flexible scheduling. And then hours is the last category that we look at. So part-time jobs are sort of inherently flexible because they have a reduced schedule, but we also look at full-time jobs that can be flexible as long as they have some other type of flexibility in them. So like I said, it's really just anything outside of the 9-to-5 traditional office schedule. As we're going through the presentation, we will refer to flexible jobs, which sort of means all of these different types of flexibility, but then we will also talk about remote or flexible schedule or freelance if we're talking about a specific type of flexible job. So let's talk about the current trends. The last year, as you're all probably very personally aware, has been an interesting one for employment, for the remote job market in particular. Remote job listings have actually increased. We look at FlexJobs data, of course, to see what jobs are doing, and we saw a 20% increase in remote job listings in 2020 over 2019 numbers. So throughout the year, that really held steady. We looked at every month during the pandemic to see if things were increasing or decreasing in terms of remote job listings, and we found that it increased every single month of the pandemic and continued to do that for the whole year. I also wanted to give a bigger picture view of what this means for remote work in general. So before the pandemic, about 4.9% of the US workforce, and this is employees only, so we're not talking about contractors or freelancers or business owners, self-employed people. This is strictly employees who work for a company or an organization. About 4.9% of those folks worked remotely full-time. And then once the pandemic hit, that number really shot up. And as of November 2020, the number became 37% of US employees were working from home full-time. And that actually was down a little bit. I think at the peak of the pandemic, it was somewhere in the 50s. percentage-wise. So it was a massive increase of people starting to work remotely in a very short amount of time. And to give you some perspective, 4.9% is the highest level that we had reached in about 20 or 25 years of remote work, slowly, steadily increasing. We got all the way to 4.9%. And then in a matter of 10 months or 9 months, we were up to 37% of the US workforce working from home. So the shift that happened in the last year in terms of remote work really can't be understated. I also wanted to include the future predictions that we're seeing. And this is not our predictions. This is based on US Census information, Bureau of Labor Statistics, those sorts of things. But the current prediction is that by 2025, about 25% of US employees will be working full-time remotely, so full-time from home. And so that means that the increase that we've seen over the last year is not going to completely erase. We're not going to see it go back to pre-pandemic numbers. And this is many different predictions predict somewhere right around 25% will continue to work from home full-time, which is just a massive change in the way that we work and how we interact with each other in a professional capacity. So we're going to talk more specifically about how you can find jobs that let you do this and have other types of flexibility as well. But that is the lay of the land at the moment. Okay, so the next few slides that I'm going to go over are lists. They are lists of career fields, job titles, and companies that we see for remote and flexible jobs. And what I usually encourage people to do during this part of the presentation is to consider what your options are. What are the possibilities for your next step in your career? So sometimes we have folks who are changing careers. They know they want to or need to do something different. But then sometimes we have people listening in who are pretty sure that they know which direction they want to go in. These slides are designated or designed to sort of give you information about where most of the jobs that happen in the remote and flexible job market fall in terms of the career fields, the industries that are hiring, and then the job titles that are hiring and the companies, and kind of give you a sense of, if you already have some ideas, are there really strong opportunities in those areas? And if you don't yet have ideas and you're looking for career change ideas, what are some of the areas where you're going to find a lot of opportunity that you could potentially change into? My colleague Tracy has shared our link there for the 10 fastest growing fields for remote jobs. That's another interesting list to look at that includes just some of the ones over the last year that we've seen grown quite a bit, especially during the pandemic. So you can see this list. These are the top 10. We list these out of 55 career fields. So just because if something isn't listed here that you're hoping to do, there are definitely many other career fields that offer remote and flexible jobs. These just happen to be the top 10. And so you'll see things like computer and IT, sales, project management, medical and health, customer service. Those take up the top spots. This list fluctuates a little bit over time, depending on the time of year, but overall it's pretty consistent, and it has been for the last number of years. And then the next thing is a list of the most common remote job titles specifically. So the last slide was for all types of flexibility, anything that was a flexible job, which career fields they would fall into. This slide is for remote jobs in particular. And the reason that we like to show this is because whenever we do surveys of people who are looking for flexible jobs, we will ask them, what's the #1 type of flexibility that you would be interested in? And very consistently, about 80% of people say remote jobs are their #1 choice for flexibility. So I wanted to point out what the most common remote job titles are. As you can see on this list of 20 job titles, there is a lot of crossover and linkage to the career fields that we just showed. And so that's important to note, that there are, specific jobs that are related to those fields, but it broadens out a little bit too. So you'll see some things on here that aren't necessarily those top fields, but are specific types of jobs where there is a lot of demand. This is only 20 job titles out of hundreds and hundreds of job titles that we look at on FlexJobs. So that's really important to know too. If something, again, isn't on the list and you are thinking, uh-oh, does that mean that that thing does not exist remotely or flexibly? That's not the case. This is only the top 20, but there are many more types of jobs out there that can be done remotely. This is just to give you a sense of where the most opportunity is. Okay, so my last list slide is the top companies hiring for flexible jobs. So this list, and Tracy just shared the link for this, is based on that company database that I was talking about at the beginning of the presentation. These are the companies that over the last 2 years have posted the most flexible jobs on FlexJobs. And the reason that I like to show this is because I think there are a lot of assumptions about where flexible work or remote work is offered. A lot of times you might think it's a startup company or strictly kind of technology companies. But this actually shows that there is a wide variety of opportunity at different types of companies, large, well-known, well-established companies, global corporations, and then smaller companies as well, and in many different industries. So one of the things that is really important when you are starting to search for remote and flexible jobs is to just keep an open mind about what the possibilities are, and don't cross things off your list before you've done a little bit of research to see if they really are possible. I think a lot of times we encounter with job seekers is that they have assumed that they can't do this type of job or that this type of company is not offering remote work. And so we try to stop people from those assumptions and really get them open to doing some research, testing those assumptions, and seeing what's out there for them. And again, that company guide that Tracy linked to, and also the jobs page, are publicly available for anybody to take a look at. And FlexJobs, just for full disclosure, on our jobs page, you'll be able to see every job that's listed on FlexJobs. Only members can see the full details for each job, so like the really long job description, and then how to apply for each job. But if you're in the research stage and you're just looking to see what's out there for you, it's a great place to research, even if you're not a FlexJobs member. Okay, so I'm also going to dive into finding companies and jobs for flexible jobs. This is outside of FlexJobs. We want to provide a lot of resources for people to search anywhere, because there are lots of good resources out there. So we've talked about the FlexJobs company guide. That's a really good place to find companies. We also offer a list of the 100 companies with remote jobs. Our most recent one came out in January. Actually, I forgot to update this slide. This should say remote jobs in 2021 because we just put that list out last month. But this is a list of the 100 companies that posted the most remote jobs over the last year. Again, it's a great research point. You can go to each of those companies' career pages and look at their current listings and see what they're offering. We also recommend going directly to companies' career pages, even if they're not on a list like that. So you might think, oh, I use this product every day. I want to see what that company is doing in terms of jobs and hiring. The nice thing about remote jobs and flexible jobs more broadly is that remote work allows you to apply for jobs with companies that aren't necessarily in your geographic location. It opens you up to more opportunities. And so you can start thinking more broadly about the types of companies that you might like to work for. The other thing we recommend doing during the pandemic time is when you're at the company's website, also try looking for their public relations page, their PR page, or their news page, sometimes it's called that, to see if they've made any announcements about their flexible work policies, because we've seen lots of companies do that over the last year. They may say that they are allowing remote work until 2022 or until the summer of 2021. They may say they've decided to adopt remote work and flexible hours in an ongoing way, that they're not going to get rid of it. And so that is a really good place to check out to see if there are any changes to that company's policy and what their flexible work policy might be. And the other thing you want to do is really think of former customers, vendors, business partners, essentially any company or organization that you have interacted with in a positive way, whether it's in your personal life or your professional life. If you have had an experience with a company that left you thinking, oh, that's a pretty good company, or I really like how that team is run, or they were super helpful, or this is a product I can't live without, I use it every single day. Look at those companies online and see what they're hiring for and see if they offer remote and flexible jobs. The reason that that we like this particular approach is because if you already have a connection to a company because you've had a good experience with them, you have something to write about in your cover letter, you have something to talk about in job interviews if you go on interviews with that company. So it creates this extra connection that not everybody is going to be able to talk about when they apply to their jobs. So that's always a helpful thing. And then if you are a graduate of a college or a university, it really doesn't matter the degree level. Most colleges and universities offer some sort of alumni services for people who graduated, and it doesn't matter if it was last year or 30 years ago. And so you can go and look for fellow alumni. A lot of things are online now, so you can actually go and search for alumni in different industries or career fields and ask them about their careers. Where have they worked? What types of companies have they worked for? What are the remote work policies or the flexible work policies at those companies? And get some more information that way. So those are just some approaches to look for companies in your job search. And then we can talk about finding flexible jobs. So those actual listings that you can apply to. So there's FlexJobs. I won't say any more about that. In general, though, we tend to recommend using smaller or specialty websites to find different places that you want to apply, different job listings. So there's a few different lists here, and I know Tracy's got those links queued up and ready to go in the chat. The first one is Skill Crush. They do a list of the 25 best sites for finding remote work. They update it every year, so it's very current and fresh. And they list the sites that they feel are really helpful in terms of finding remote jobs in particular. So those are some good sources. And then Proven has a list of the 100 plus job boards for job seekers and recruiters. And these are specialized by industry. So you'll be able to find different job search websites that specialize in a particular industry that you might be interested in. And then Ryan Robinson offers a list of the 72 best freelance job websites to get remote freelance work. It's a long title, but essentially it allows you to find freelance remote work through all these different websites, and it's organized by job type. So again, it's a specialty list. So you can find these smaller websites that specialize in either an industry or a job type or a type of flexibility. And the reason that we like those is because they offer you fewer listings, but that means you are spending less time filtering those listings, weeding through all sorts of jobs that do not apply to you to get to those ones you actually like. When you go to a really big, all-encompassing website that doesn't specialize in some way, you spend a lot of time sifting through millions of listings, literally millions of listings on those sites. And nobody needs millions of listings. What you really need is a curated group of listings that are really special to you in some way, because then it just saves you a lot of time and energy. Also, you can go to industry and professional associations. They often have job boards. They're talking more about remote and flexible jobs on those job boards, which is great. But they also offer networking opportunities, a great way to connect with people in your industry and make connections for your job search, which can be really helpful. And then the last thing is asking your friends, your family, your neighbors, your professional network for their best tips on finding a job. How did they find their last job? What companies have they worked for? Are they able to work flexibly in their current role if they are working? The more people you involve in your job search, the better. Job search can be really isolating. It tends to be you sitting at a computer looking through listings a lot. If you can get people involved in that, even just to give them a heads up, hey, I'm looking for work. I'm hoping to work remotely in the field of digital marketing. If you hear of anything, keep me in mind. That just plants that little seed in the back of people's minds. And the more people you plant that seed with, the more likely, just to finish the metaphor, the more likely something is to sprout. So we really like to just say, just try not to isolate yourself in your job search. Involve people whenever you can. Okay, so just a couple more slides, and then I'm going to turn it over to Tracy. So there are some keywords that are better when you're searching for remote jobs in particular. Telecommuting, virtual, and remote tend to be the top 3 keywords that we see companies using. So if you're searching online anywhere, you want to try using those phrases, those keywords the most often. But we also wanted to point out some of the lesser used phrases that still do say, hey, this is a remote job. So if you ever see them, then you know that what you're looking at is a remote job. And those are things like distributed team, home-based, open nationwide, home-shored, location agnostic, which is one of my favorites, and then telework, which is a little bit of an older phrase, but still some companies do use that. So it's just important to know all of the different phrases that might mean remote work if that's what you're looking for, so that when you see the listings, you'll be able to pinpoint that that is indeed a remote job. But when you're actually doing your searching, make sure you're using telecommute, virtual, and remote. Those tend to be the top ones. So let's also talk about how to avoid job scams. So this is the last section that I'll cover. Job scams are an unfortunate part of the remote and flexible job market, and even more so since the pandemic began. There are more scams than ever because of the pandemic, and so we want to just help people stay safe. One of the things you can do is just know these warning signs. So keep this information kind of in the back of your head and just be thinking about this as you're going through job listings. Are you seeing any of these warning signs? One warning sign doesn't mean you have definitely found a scam, but the more warning signs you start to see for one particular job listing or one company, the more likely it is that you're dealing with a scam. So there are the warning signs of having no company name on the listing or having a generic email address, something like a Gmail or a Hotmail instead of the company's email address. If they have a vague job description or no job description at all, a lot of times scammers focus on how easy the job will be or how much money you're going to make or how you get to work from home and there's all these great perks. So that's really important to pay attention to. If a company offers you an interview on instant messenger or online chat, that's a red flag. There are some companies that do their interviews that way, some legitimate companies, but the vast majority of companies that we see offering remote jobs, legitimate remote jobs, will want you to do a phone interview or a video interview, something like that. At least one, if not multiple. And then there are copycat companies. So we see companies that are real, well-known companies, where a scammer will take that company's name, their logo, their website design, and they will create a fake website that is masquerading as this real company. And they're just using that real name, that well-known company name, to lure people in. Because when you see a well-known company name that you already have an association with, you're more likely to let your guard down a little bit because you just feel like, okay, this is a big reputable company. I don't have to be quite as cautious here, but really you do. So the key there is that the URLs, the web addresses, don't match. And I'm going to show you how you can figure that out on the next slide. But the main thing, whenever we talk to people who have been the victims of job scams before, the main thing to remember, and they always say this, is I should have trusted my instincts. Most people feel that something isn't quite right. They're running into these red flags, but they're not paying attention to them, or they're pushing them off to the side and hoping for the best, because job searching is not that much fun for most people and you want it to be over with. And so when you get these leads that seem really great, I missed one, immediate job offers and the urgency to accept them right away without having to think about it. That almost never happens. I mean, that would be like a 1 in a million thing to have a company reach out to you and say, hey, we really like you, here's a job. Those are almost always scams. But the main thing is, when people are going through this process, they don't trust that instinct that something seems a little bit off, and they just keep going, hoping that it is real. And that's completely understandable. So what you want to remind yourself is to not just go with the flow, but to do some research and to know that it only takes a couple minutes. It's not going to take you a lot of time to decide whether you should keep going with a job or whether it's probably a scam and you might want to walk away. So here's a couple simple search methods to stay safe. The first one is for any company or job where you're unsure if it's real or if it's a scam. You can open up a browser on the internet and search for that company's name or the job title and the word scam. So you might search for ABC Corporation scam, something like that. And what's going to come up are local news listings, Better Business Bureau reports, FBI warnings, FTC warnings, all sorts of news stories or information out there that may say this is a scam, if it is. And so that's a really simple way to do some research to see if what you're dealing with is real or a scam. You might also find online forums, so places like Reddit or even on LinkedIn, these come up sometimes, where people who've been scammed have publicly decided to discuss it so that they can hopefully keep other people safe. So you're going to find forums that might discuss these as well. So that's really important. It's a simple search and it just lets you know, okay, there's really nothing out there that says this is a scam. Let me do a little bit more research, but maybe I can proceed. Or if you're finding some things, you're going to think twice and hopefully just move to the next job or the next company. And then the second method is for those really well-known big name companies where you think maybe this isn't a real job posting from that company, maybe it's a copycat company. You can, again, just open up a fresh internet browser, search for the company's name and the keyword careers to find their real careers page. And then you can compare that web address on the real page to the one that you were questioning to see if they're the same. If they're not the same, then what you found might have been a copycat company website that is run by scammers, and you can walk away from that. So like I said, it just takes a couple minutes to do some research to keep yourself safe, but it can save you so much time and frustration and money, and all of those sorts of things in the long run if you do that kind of research. So definitely do that as you're going through your process. But now I'm going to turn it over to Tracy, who's going to talk about positioning yourself for flexible jobs.
Great. Thank you, Brie. That was wonderful. I hope everybody was able to take a moment to save those resources that we put into the chat, and we're going to continue doing that as we move forward. So could we move forward to the next slide? Great. So now we're going to be talking about preparing yourself for your remote job search applications. So some first things you're going to want to think about are some skills. And these might be skills that you already have, and these are skills that we find most remote and flexible employers are looking for. So some of these skills are written and verbal communication, having the ability to task manage and time manage, being able to focus, and along with that comes being self-motivated. When you are working remotely or in a flexible distributed environment, you can't just, pop into somebody's office to talk about a project that you're working on, or to have some collaboration. And at the same time, you don't necessarily have people coming in and popping in and interrupting your work. So you need to be able to really set boundaries and get situated so that you can stay motivated and get your work done, because your boss isn't going to be coming in and looking over your shoulder to make sure you're getting your work in on time. Being proactive is another great skill that flexible and remote employers are looking for. They want to know that you're comfortable and confident in speaking up and asking questions. And these may be questions that you have about the process or about how you collaborate, maybe about how things are done at work. But at the same time, it may be ways for you to learn how you can change situations or streamline things. So what they really want is you to be proactive and very clear with your communication. That's very important. And then the next one is having comfortability with technology. This is something that a lot of people have had to learn and quickly over the past few months because of the pandemic. So getting real familiar with technology, different platforms and systems, but then also having that open mindset and growth mindset for when technology changes, because it does change quickly. We see that quite often with new devices. And so learning how to find a system that best suits you and one you can grow with and then adapt to is very important. And then I mentioned growth mindset, and then becoming familiar with those digital collaboration tools. So these are just some general skills that you might already have. If you notice that maybe there's a few on this list you could work towards, we do have some things that we'll be talking about and ways that you guys can enhance this. And now is a great time to be working on these skills so that you can kind of own that narrative and craft that narrative of what you've been doing professionally during this time in the pandemic while looking for a job. You could say that you've, developed strong digital communication tools by attending various tutorials and online classes. So next slide. Great. So here are some systems that are out there that we see quite often that remote companies and flexible employers are using. So they come in a variety of different categories. So instant messaging, and here are some systems within instant messaging like Slack and Google Chat or HipChat. Video conferencing, Zoom like we're on tonight, Join Me or Microsoft Teams, Google Hangouts, and GoTo are some ones that are out there and readily used. Then you have your file sharing documents such as a Google Drive or a Dropbox or Microsoft OneDrive. And then you have a virtual office environment. And that's like a Yammer or a Microsoft Teams, a Sococo. And these are all different softwares that are out there. We find that sometimes remote candidates will have experience with one, but maybe not the other. So if you're really interested in learning how you can beef up your skills, You can always try and find a free tutorial or a YouTube video on these different systems and watch that. I know, for instance, for example, my husband and son, they started a business during the pandemic. Just as a way for him to learn, my son to learn about entrepreneurship. And my husband realized real quickly that he needed to integrate an instant messaging system into that work to get my son engaged. And so he found a system that my son really liked, and they communicate back and forth on that regularly. My husband is away for an extended business trip at the moment, and so they're even doing that across continental time zones. So getting comfortable and familiar with that is one thing you can do. I know that when they were working on this, we all got to join in and learned that new instant messaging system. So there's ways that you can build this skill. You don't necessarily have to be proficient. You just have to have an understanding and a growth mindset, a desire to want to learn these new skills so that when you get into these environments, you're comfortable and confident, and you pick up that skill much more quickly. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to talk about resumes and how to prepare your resume for a flexible job. So what you may want to ask yourself is, do I have flexible work? That's the first question. And you want to start asking yourself this very important question. Is there ever a time where you either worked from home occasionally or all of the time, or you had a flexible schedule? Maybe that was working part-time or full-time, or you were freelancing, or maybe this was in a volunteer situation where maybe part of that was at one location versus another. And if you find that you are answering yes to these situations and that you're working across maybe different time zones with others, then you can say, yes, that's a flexible situation. If you're confident and comfortable about it, then I would go ahead and put it on your resume so that you can then discuss that with an employer. So the next step then is you want to highlight how you have worked remotely and in flexible environments so that these remote employers see that you are already experienced in that area. So for instance, when looking at the first set of bullets, you can say right next to the job description where it says marketing coordinator, remote work. So you're kind of already indicating that that work was done in a remote manner. Maybe this was an independent freelance contracting job. So you could add that in as well. So maybe it says independent contractor, remote work. The next might be how you indicate the location. So maybe you were located in Dallas, Texas, and that was 100% remote work. But maybe the office was located, say, in Seattle, Washington. So you could put next to that where they have the employer, Seattle, Washington based, and you are Dallas based, 100% remote work. So there's ways to put that in your resume so that it shows the employer that you're comfortable in these distributed environments and that you can still be very successful. If it comes to the point where you realize you don't have actual remote work experience, and please know that remote work experience does not, as I said before, does not have to be paid. It can also be an educational experience. So maybe you took a course remotely, maybe you're enrolled in a course right now during the pandemic, and that course does not have to be a formalized course through like a school. Maybe it's a course that you've paid for through Skillshare or Udemy, something like that. You can list those educational environments and those educational opportunities on your resume as well. And then next to that course title, you would put virtual studies or remote platform. And by indicating that, that lets the employer know, again, you had to do work, you had to work on projects, maybe you collaborated with other team members or classmates on projects in a very distributed environment. So there are many ways that you can add that in. If you don't have any flexible or remote experience, then here's the time that we're going to go back to that skill, that slide that we just talked about, and really tout those skills that you have. Those that you've developed that have been technology-based, those different software systems, and then those flex-friendly skills that we mentioned. So your written and verbal communication skills, your ability to time manage and task manage, and that you're very proactive and self-motivated. Those skills are then going to be your bridge to get over to that new remote environment. Okay, next slide. Great. So now we're going to talk about actually putting that information within the byline or the job line of your resume. So here we have a couple of examples, and right here, so for the first one, we're looking at a faculty or a student mentoring situation, and then right over next to that in the red, you see fully remote work. So it's very plain and right there for the reader to see that this person has completed this work in a remote environment. Now, maybe you didn't want to have it right there. Maybe you wanted it to be a little bit right underneath that job title, so you could move it over there. So it's right beneath the business consultant position. And then on the third one, we see 20% remote work. Remote work doesn't have to always be 100%. It's not always fully remote. Sometimes it's partial remote, where maybe you've had to travel into an office 2 to 3 days a week, kind of like how some of our children are doing a hybrid remote learning situation. If any of those children had to write a resume, they could put right here, student partial remote work. And a lot of them have probably learned some great skills at doing that. But this is what you guys can do as well. You can numerate it and give it a percentage amount. But if you don't want to do that, you could also just say partial remote work. And then you can discuss that in the interview once you get into that phase. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is a very important piece of how you're going to actually integrate those flex-friendly skills that we talked about, particularly if you find that you have some remote work, not a lot, or maybe even a very small amount of remote work. So this underlined in red are some of those flex-friendly skills that I mentioned in a few slides back. So for instance, this first one, we have right here, proactive, articulate, written and verbal communication skills. You want to put that right up front and integrate that into your professional summary so that the reader of your resume sees that you are confident and comfortable using those skills. Then you can go in and you can go further down and talk about how you've worked in local or remote teams. The next one, oops, I'm sorry, I just moved my own slide forward. There we go. And then the next one underneath, so this individual, if you do have actual remote experience in that job title or that job description is talking about how they want a certain number of remote experienced years, you can go ahead and list that right into that bullet point section, like the second one here that says 6 years experience working remotely in a flexible office environment. You can integrate that in. If you don't have something like that, then I would consider removing this and going more towards saying that you're just experienced and confident, comfortable working in a flexible and remote friendly environment. Always bring in some collaboration terminology, so team effectiveness and productivity through communication. That's another way of highlighting those communication and collaboration skills. And then in the third one, again, we do it, again, going back to that team collaboration while working independently in remote environments. So these are all samples and examples of how you're going to integrate in those flex-friendly skills that we mentioned. Okay, next slide. Great. So technology. This is a very important section that's within the resume that remote and flexible friendly employers are looking for. They want to know, and as we've talked about earlier, they really want to know what your technology knowledge is. So you're not necessarily saying you're an expert in these, but you want to put on the ones that you feel comfortable in, that you have some experience in. So create a technology skills section, and be sure to list out the suites. And if you are going to list the suites, say like for instance, right here we have Microsoft Office, go ahead and name the individual software systems or the programs within that suite. So I would encourage you to list out Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook. You know, sometimes in that job description, an employer might actually state that they want someone who's very capable and has advanced Excel knowledge. If that's the case, I would list it just like this, and maybe next to Excel, I would put -advanced, so that that's being paired up and matched up. And then if I wanted to further highlight my Excel knowledge, I could go back to my professional summary and mention that Excel in there as well. Then you go into talking further about your remote collaboration tools, video conferencing, email, and phone. And it's good to know that you can always bring back those very solid and stable communication tools of email and phone. That's still kind of our first distance modality way of communicating with people, and it still is occurring. So our technology skills don't have to be fancy dancy ones that are new and coming out and growing because of the pandemic. We want to include both so that we're well-rounded candidates applying for these opportunities. You can write these in a variety of ways, but just be sure to have this within your resume. We tend to put this section towards the bottom, right before your education. However, there are a few times where you may put this technology skills closer towards the top of the resume, maybe integrated into your professional summary section. And that situation would be if you're an IT person and there are a lot of different skills, technology software systems that are being noted in that job description, then you may want to move this section to the top. But this is a very important section for remote job seekers. Okay, next slide. Great, thank you. So this is something that we have been talking a lot about at FlexJobs, and then we've been talking about it even more since the pandemic. So career breaks and how to capture that career break of where you might be having a gap in your career. Right now, it may be because of a layoff. It may be because you're furloughed and then that furlough turned into a layoff. And it may be because you're pivoting and trying to find a different opportunity and moving into a new industry because the pandemic has kind of really gotten rid of the current industry that you were in. So there's a lot of reasons why you may need a career break. Some other ones may be because you guys have had to relocate. Maybe you've relocated in support of a spouse, or maybe you're staying home having to take care of family or an elderly person. There's a variety of reasons, but the two reasons why we want to have these on the resume are: one, you want to own the narrative. You want to own the reason why there's an actual break in your career history, and you don't want to let the recruiter or the hiring manager kind of create questions or create their own story. So we encourage you to go ahead and place that into the professional experience section of the resume as if it were an actual job. And your job title would be planned career break. Or if it's because of the pandemic, maybe you've been laid off and you are doing some professional networking, maybe attending webinars such as tonight, and you're working on some certifications, then you could do something that's similar to, I think it's the last one, the pandemic one, where you say you're proactively pursuing certifications within an online format. So then that way you're creating that story and you're presenting it to the recruiter so that kind of closes any opportunity for them to start wondering what you've been doing. The second reason that you want to have this on your resume is because it literally fills a gap. As these resumes go through the applicant tracking system and it's parsing and uploading the information, it's scanning these dates and bringing them in, and it's looking to make sure that there are no gaps between the dates. If it happens to have found a gap, then it may flag your resume. So to avoid that, actually putting in this placeholder, that ends that situation, and then you create the story and the recruiter sees that. Planned career breaks and having this on your resume is very common. And we have found that one study that we looked at compared job applicants, those that had actually used the planned career break on their resume and cover letter, and those that did not. And those that did use it were 60%, they had a 60% greater chance of getting an interview than those that did not. So it is something that we really encourage you guys to include into your resumes and get comfortable and confident with the reasons for those gaps and having it on there. And please know there are times where you may have 2 gaps. And we have actually worked with clients that have had 2 gaps. And that may be because maybe they've moved and then during that move they had to go back to work, and then after going back to work for a while they had to stop and take care of a family member. So there's always reasons for why life happens, and you just need to kind of take control of that narrative. Okay, next slide. Okay, so now we're here to talk a little bit about action steps and then move into our question and answer. But the first things you're going to want to consider and always keep in mind is the flexibility. What is it that you're looking for in your ideal flex? What type of flexible work is going to work best for you and for your family's needs? What are your career areas that you're interested? Maybe some of those top career fields and most common job titles might be good to go back and review those. And then what are the companies that are out there that are currently hiring in those areas? So this piece really speaks to research. Do your research first so that you can be a more prepared and better job seeker. Then you move into identifying those best flexible and remote friendly skills that we mentioned. So that would be your written and verbal communication skills, your ability to be proactive and self-motivated, your digital communication and technology skills, kind of beefing those up. Get your application materials together. So take a look at your resume, take a look at your cover letter, make sure that you are getting those up to speed so that you can prepare. And then you start interacting and engaging with your network. It's very important to let people know you are job searching, and that's your professional and personal network. Please keep in mind that even though we are in a pandemic and jobs are growing in terms of jobs that are being posted on our site, it still does come down to sometimes that hidden job market, and that can be close to 70% of jobs that are out there that you may not know about unless you had somebody looking out for you. So make sure you get that network involved. And then start applying for your remote jobs, see what happens, keep track of it so that you can go back and tweak situations, tweak things so that you can continue moving forward. And so now it's time for questions.
Well, thank you, Brie and Tracy. That was great. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand and I can unmute you, or you can type it in the chat. Oh, looks like we have one already.
Okay, looks like, excuse me, I lost my voice somewhere between when I stopped talking and now. I had my own business, but sold it and now transitioned into regular employment. How do you display this on a resume? I can say a couple things and then I'm sure Tracy will have a couple things too. So in general, you would display this in your professional experience section that in the same kind of chronology that you would use for any type of work experience that you've had. You don't necessarily want to have it in a separate section. Usually employers are looking for a reverse chronological type of resume. So they're just looking to see your work history in order from most recent to least recent. So it sounds like this person has already sold the business and then transitioned into regular employment. So you're going to have your current position, your regular employment that you're in now, and then below that in the chronology, you would have this job. And so you can give your, whatever job title you think is most appropriate. Because you owned your own business, you can sort of design your job title in a way that would be useful for your next steps. So instead of just saying business owner or entrepreneur or CEO, you could list some of the main activities depending on the type of business that it was and the type of work that you were doing, to be, chief marketing officer or anything like that, marketing director, just to give an example for marketing. But if you were going to go into a different field, you'd want to think about what work did you do as a business owner that would kind of translate or transfer, I'm trying to think of transferable skills to that new job. And then you could design your job title that way and the name of the business. And then you would have just a couple bullet points about your accomplishments there, the work that you did, and in particular, those skills that you use that are going to help you in your next career move. So whatever you're going towards in the future.
I completely agree with you. And I was actually thinking marketing director,
So
which
funny,
is so crazy that you said that. I was like, thinking, oh, well, marketing, yes. Because as Brie said, you really want to kind of craft that title that supports the theme, the overall theme of the resume. And you want to include the job functions and the job duties and the aspects of that entrepreneurship position that you had that support the theme of the resume. So if it is more marketing that you're going, then focus more on the marketing pieces. You don't have to focus so much on the budgeting side or the accounting side that you did. You wouldn't, that doesn't necessarily need to be the focus of the resume. But the overall theme is what you would want to go with. So yeah, I completely agree with you on that. That's excellent.
Yeah, good question. We're in sync, Tracy.
Yeah.
Great minds, huh?
Yes.
All right, while we wait for more questions, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and share some more updates. Well, here's my information here. If anybody has any further questions for them after the webinar. And again, thank you both to Brie and Tracy. That was wonderful. Yeah, we still are presenting these webinars, but we also are meeting with people one-on-one. So if you want, we've been hosting a lot of practice interviews lately, doing resume reviews, cover letter reviews, things like that. So please feel free to reach out.
Yes, and I should have mentioned in that slide where we talk about all the different places to go for jobs and companies and career support. Libraries are such a fantastic resource for that. And definitely go do a mock interview at your local library. We love mock interviews and wish that everyone would do them to prepare for interviews.
Yes. Oops, do we have another question here? It looks like someone's asking, do you help people out of state? Oh, is this, I don't know if it's for us or.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know either.
I'm happy to meet with people through Zoom. So we've been meeting with people definitely outside of the Champaign area. Of course, we might go back to presenting our workshops on site whenever we can, but we hope to continue these webinars as well and meeting with people virtually. So yes, at the Champaign Library. Thanks for clarifying. But yeah, I'd be happy to meet with you. Just reach out to us. And we hope you can consider attending more webinars. Our next career webinar will be next Tuesday, February 23rd at 7 p.m. And it'll be Cover Letter Basics by Dawn Kutza, who is an instructor at Indiana University. And then we hope you'll consider attending more webinars. We are, of course, continuing our career webinars well into the spring. So I've listed the March workshops here, but we have a lot more webinars related to our business series, career series, of course, our tech series, our writers workshops, and our really popular crafty adults. So please visit champaign.org/events for more information. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, our library is open for grab and go service right now. We were closed for the last 2 days because of the weather, but we are reopening again tomorrow at 9 a.m. And again, you could email us here. I have our email up here. You could request those Book a Librarian sessions right now, even if you don't live in Champaign. So visit champaign.org/bookalibrarian, and you'll get into, I'll essentially just send you a Zoom link and we'll meet just like this where you can see me and hear me. So, and I don't think there's any more questions here. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us. And then once again, Brie and Tracy, that was really great. I was taking a lot of notes. So.
Oh.
Well, thank you I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar unless you two have anything else to share.
No, thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you. It's so great to see all the resources you're doing for the community. And I say that because my local library is not open to the public. You have to pay an annual fee for it. So it's, I know, it's very strange. So it's great to see this and that you're reaching out to people beyond your community.
Yeah, even former residents of Champaign have reached out to us. So it's been great to stay connected with everyone.
That's great.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and end the webinar. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.